Hey guys, it's your boy Wasabi, and this is a new segment about two of my favorite things, because I'm a huge nerd: competitive philosophies and anime. I've always been interested in the hero's journey, and like many of you, I'm sure, have related myself to fictional characters who inspire us. I mean, who doesn't want to be a sick anime protagonist? Anyway, the whole point of this is just to get some friends together to talk about a specific anime, quote, or moment, and to self reflect on it. It's going to be very personal, and there will be spoilers to the anime or manga depending on the episode, so please listen to me when I give the spoiler warning. For this first episode, we're going to be talking about Haikyuu, and for a spoiler warning, we're going to go over stuff likely from the entire anime, so seasons 1 through 4. If you've seen it, if you've not seen it, I'm sorry, but we're going to talk about it. So tune in for the next episode. Anyway, I'm here to welcome my friend Ventus Matt, aka Remarkable Matt.
What's up?
No much, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm like super psyched to talk about Haikyuu, my favorite show of all time.
I know. I mean, we've been gushing over Haikyuu for a long time. So really, this whole idea is just stemming from us fanboying over it.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, one of the first conversations I've ever had with Will was we were playing Melee and we had pretty much like a 2 hour conversation just about Haikyuu and like the philosophy in it and like oh my god. Haikyuu is so sick.
Yeah, it's super super sick, and I'm so excited to start talking about this because like we have so many quotes to go over. Like we won't be able to get through Haikyuu today. And for context for the viewer, Matt already knows this. I've been like screenshotting anime quotes from manga or from animes for like 2 or 3 years now. I have like over a
Mhm.
gig of screenshots in a folder of anime quotes from different animes and mangas. So I'm excited to like finally get this started. But as kind of the intro, I was thinking, how do I start off episode one? And I think this idea that everyone wants to be their own protagonist of their story, right? And that we relate each to like the main character is something really interesting. But I think what
Mhm.
Haikyuu does well, and what the stream overlay is, obviously ping pong the animation, also does well, is that they have a slew of multifaceted characters that don't just have backstories, but are main characters in themselves. Like you could argue that so many of the Haikyuu cast has their not just moments in games, but also are main characters in their own right, depending on the season or episode. And so that's kind of where I want to get started, and I kind of want to let you go first, Matt, on that.
Okay, so like what do you mean by that? Like you said in the terms of like all these different characters can be their main characters. Are you talking about like who do I resonate with, or how does that like like the philosophies of characters, and what direction do you want to take?
Yeah, yeah. So first, let's that's a good question. Let's first start with just like the general breakdown of like how Haikyuu has just created like 10 to 20 different main characters. And then
Okay,
and then let's
actually,
finish with like more of the personal stuff. Like who do we love, who do we resonate with, and that sort of thing.
yeah, okay, so that's actually really funny. So before like prepping for this episode, because Will was like, "Yo, you want to like come on and basically talk about Haikyuu?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah!" Like, dude, I like Will already knows how much I love Haikyuu, and Will also like me and him will geek out about this. But I was texting people and I was like, "Hey, I'm going on this like podcast. Like, what do you think about Haikyuu? Like, what were your first impressions, and what do you like most about it?" And one of the responses I got was basically like, I love how everybody, like, you end up caring about everybody. Like, there's not just like the main characters, but it's like the enemy team. There are people that you really like, and like in tons of opposing teams, right? And there's like the training camp, and like all this stuff. And shout out to there's a YouTube video called "The View from the Summit." I think they go over this really well. Um, but I think that one of the biggest strengths of Haikyuu as a show, just in general, is just that they like there really is no villains in Haikyuu.
Mm-hmm.
Like even in the when Kurosawa is playing teams, it's like God, like I would be completely fine with a spin-off show of Haikyuu with it following another team besides Kurosano, because there's so like some teams that only show up once in the series are just side characters. I feel like are genuinely more fleshed out than entire main characters of some shows, and I don't know, it's sick. Sorry for tangenting, but yeah.
No, no, that's no tangent at all. That gave me so many ideas. I agree as well. Like, I mean, I just showed my girlfriend Pilar the anime, and she's not a big
Hmm.
sports anime person. She made fun of me watching Haikyuu last year, actually.
Oh,
And now
really?
she's like, Haikyuu's my boy. Like, listening to, like, the OP openings and stuff like that. Like, Hikari Are. But, you know, maybe one thing that stood out to me is, from what you said, is that you just care, like, about each of the teams also. Like, and they could be just one-off teams. Like, do you remember, and this is personally one of my favorite moments of Haikyuu, is
Mhm.
when Daichi gets injured in season 2,
Yeah.
and they kind of have that counter Daichi, maybe the anti Flash, the anti Daichi, who's the
Hmm.
exact same copy of him in Takaru, and I thought
Hmm.
his story was so interesting as well. Like, him being the team captain and kind of having the team on his back. He kind of, in my opinion, was almost like the quintessential main character from a much more standard sports anime. You know?
Oh man, he really was. Like if you look at just like the background on him, like he's almost more like stereotypically met like has the background story for a main captain or main like yeah for like the a captain of a team. Like his whole family was there. They went into how he like had a big family, but he had like rallied the troops and all this and like I don't know, that is like a perfect example though, because it's like it's almost like so poetic in how it made so much sense how he was of a character, and you saw all these people who like genuinely cared about him and how he inspired his teammates and all this stuff, that it's like man, like I really would root for you if you were not going against Kurosano. And also it made him intimidating too, because when Daichi was out, it was like, it was really great character development for Inoshita, but I was like, how is Inoshita gonna be like this dude is clearly has like captain material in his DNA. You see why it makes sense why the opposing team's captain would make a great captain. So at the same time as like not only did it like character develop him and like make you like feel for that character and like him, but it also like made him more intimidating because it's like man, it just makes a lot of sense on like why he is the way he is.
Yeah, and he was also like a foil to Hinata, where his main weapon as the wing spiker was to really battle in the air because he wasn't super tall either. And and
Hmm.
and then what's crazy about that is that you have the like people like gosh, I forget his name, but in season 4 they introduced him, the really tall guy who has zero technique that Hinata kind of tutors.
Oh, they actually introduced him
I know they
earlier.
introduced him earlier, but like that's when he had more of his moment. I felt like he could have been
Yeah,
a main character as well. Like the guy who just
dude,
started out
that
in high
guy's
school with like all physical talent and expectations, and yet
yeah.
no real technique or experience.
Yeah. So a little bit permission, geek out warning. So I've been rewatching season 2 with
Yeah.
people, and we got to that episode.
Yes. Yeah. Right. He
Like
appears in season 2.
we're right on that episode. So the fact that Haikyuu does this a lot too. This is like a side tangent, but like Haikyuu will do things. They will set things up way early on, and sometimes there's like a through line, sometimes there's not. Usually there is, but it's like 50-50. The whole show plays on like the concept of
Mm-hmm.
uncertainty really well. Um, but I completely agree. Like you had him in season 2, and that was like a juxtaposition against Hinata,
Yes. Right.
right?
Right. Just
Where
the most anti Hinata out there.
exactly, and then you see Hinata. he shows up in season 4 as character development for Hinata, but also himself. Like, it completely made sense. He was the exact opposite of Hinata. And for those who are less familiar with Haikyuu, basically this character is someone, Hinata, the main character, is really like, he's short, but he's like really quick, and he's just like really passionate, right? But he doesn't have a lot of the tools at his disposal aren't like the obvious tools for volleyball. Whereas the other character, I don't remember
Isn't
his
it like
name, but he's
Hishigaya or
based.
something like that?
We're gonna go with that, Hishigaya. Um, Apologies if it's not, but he has like he's built for volleyball. Like, he's super tall, which is an actual huge advantage. They talk about that, and it kind of carried him.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he's not happy with the fact that he's getting carried by his height. And he feels during the training camp, he feels like guilty because he's like, because when the Hinata was there, he's like, you should be here, not me. But Hinata was like, dude, what are you talking about, dude? Height is a huge weapon. And that was really cool too, to just see that through line of like Hinata talking, because they had that from season 2, the juxtaposition, but then you actually saw both perspectives where both of these characters were basically jealous of the other people because of like what they had and what they didn't have. And then they really brought it full circle. I'm not going to spoil that part because just in case, but they really brought it full circle, that arc at the end of the season. And that was super cool too, like bringing everything full circle.
Yeah, and we
Anyway,
only need a really spoiled the end of season 4, and his name is Hyakuzawa. So I was kind of
all
close,
right.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I think that was so cool that they were like both jealous of each other, and there was also like, and this kind of ties to the next point, which is like Hinata recognized him and his strengths, and it's something that he will never ever have as a character. And I think that is something that you don't really see. That acknowledgement of weakness is something that you don't see a lot of the time in sports or traditional like battle or shonen anime, where it's like, yeah, dude, like shut the fuck up. You're tall. Like you'll always be tall. That's like the best weapon in volleyball. And I think like that's the craziest part, is because I mean the whole point of this first episode is that like there isn't just one main character in Haikyuu, right? And similar to how there is no one main character in like life in general, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I now that you bring that up, and I didn't really put these dots together until you just said that. I like a little bit. I've thought about this before, but I feel like you put it in a really good way. A lot of anime, especially sports anime, like to pretend that talent doesn't exist, and Haikyuu does a really nuanced take on it that I think is a lot more grounded in reality. And it's not just that, it's basically more like everybody has talent or strengths and weaknesses in their own way. And you absolutely need to work hard, right? That like
mm-hmm.
that's obvious. And like Haikyuu shows that. But there's also ways to utilize your strengths. Like Hinata would stereotypically not be seen as a strong character, right?
Yeah.
But he works around his strengths and weaknesses. That's the same with Tsukishima, the guy who's really lazy on Seijo, but like towards the end of the games, he like plays super hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also like a huge strength of Haikyuu, is that like everybody has, like, I don't want to say talent because that's like kind of a loaded term, but everybody has different strengths and weaknesses, and it's not about just working hard. Like, you don't see Hinata work hard and he's just like him working hard doesn't mean that he would be able to do the same things that like Kageyama would do, right? But it's also like working hard in tune with what your strengths are at the same time, and discovering what your strengths are. I think is a huge part of Haikyuu, because like Tsukishima could never play like Kageyama,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, like Tsukishima doesn't need to play like Kageyama. Like the best way for him to play is to level up his strengths and shore up his weaknesses, but not like try to turn in like work hard in a direction where it's just somebody that he's completely not. If that makes any sense.
No, it completely does, and I love the way you kind of continued that idea of like that everyone has their own strength, because that's really the point that I'm trying to get at for, as I said, for this first episode, where like I think it's hard to relate, and this is super funny because I think there is a flaw in relating oneself to a fictional character, not just because they're fictional, but because no character, both either fictional or real,
Mm-hmm.
relates to you. You know, like we each all have our own experiences. And bringing up Kunami from Aoba Josai, the really lazy guy who is very
Yeah.
cunning about being lazy, and Oikawa just expects him to, you know, cover for everyone's asses when they're tired game 3, you know, set 3, because he hasn't been running as much. And I think that's so smart. Like, and I think that was a flaw I saw in myself even. Like that's the reason I have like a folder of anime quotes, is like that, you know, we want to believe in that, we want to see the similarities in us and in fictional characters. Like it's everyone wants to, and it doesn't have to be. I know I'm talking about Haikyuu, and you are very very new to the melee scene, right?
I am
Um,
correct. I'm adoptee in the
yes, yeah, exactly. But you know, a few years ago, and it's kind of an ode to that. The stream layout's an ode to that. Is there was a ping pong to animation craze, and everyone was talking about Smile and Peko and Dragon and the rest of the characters, and trying to figure out like what, you know, who they are most like, who they resonate with, what philosophies they really liked. I mean, even the New York City PR back in like what was this 2015 was a ping pong to
Mhm.
animation PR panel, which was by far one of the sickest PR banners ever, but still
Mhm.
like still true. And I think what's crazy is that like as I've kind of gotten a little bit older, a little bit more into the scene, I've started to realize that like I think it's so much easier to chase this idea of like a framework of a character that rather than like discovering your own. If if that makes sense.
Wow, that's actually a really interesting take. Yeah. I mean, I think the cool part about anime is that hopefully you see yourself in certain characters,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, but even like as we were talking, right? Like, and I guess spoiler alert for later, but it's like we don't see our each other. Like for me, there are characters that I relate to more
Mm-hmm.
to, but I would see myself as a blend of certain characters. Like there are certain traits where I'm like, I really see this in a character and I can totally resonate with that. But there's also like pieces of other characters that I like. It's not the complete thing because there's not going to be, there can be characters that really resonate with you, but it's like at the same time, like every single individual, both in Haikyuu, which by the way, that's like one of the best parts about Haikyuu is that even characters that are alike are nuancedly different, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, yeah, like the twins, season 4,
Yes.
like they're literally twins and they're different, even though they are similar. And I think that it's super sick to see yourself in characters, but at the same time, it's like um, there are different aspects. Like you're more than just a framework. No, but like each individual is like you're an individual, and so that's like you're your own character, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I really agree with you about like the Mia twins especially, right? Like they are literally twins, and for the entire like whole second part of the season, their whole thing was that they could kind of do anything the other person could do, right? And they competed about that. If someone could set, the other person can set. If someone can spike, the other person can spike. And yet there's such nuanced differences in them, and they towards the end start to explore that, you know, with the Mia twins specifically, it being sort of their obsessiveness and love for volleyball and competition, you know? And I think that speaks volumes because while it's so minute, it's so big too, right? Like no one considers it a talent, but I remember Ryobi talking about it or one night or some other player from New York. I'm pretty sure it was Ryobi, but you know, this idea of loving the game itself, loving melee is a talent in a way because it means you're always going to work on it. It means that you have this sort of obsessiveness to the game that other players might not have. You know, where in the middle of a global pandemic, right, for example, there are people still grinding the game, while others, while it's still a totally okay path, have chosen to pursue other things, which is something that Haikyuu talks about as well. You know, like with Sugawara being okay, changing his path from being the first choice setter to being almost the both the backup setter, pinch player, and more importantly the emotional like backbone of the team, right?
Mhm.
And he shifts with such grace in the first and second season, and it continues into the third and fourth. But you really see it develop in the first and second season, and that's like what his thing is, right? Like, and you couldn't have Karasuno make it to as far as they did in season four without Sugawara's guidance and help, you know? And I think that is so crazy because you could argue that he is probably the least important third year because he's the one not playing in every game compared to Asahi and Daichi.
Yeah, I mean, well, can I geek out about Sugawara real
No,
quick?
no, please do. I mean, this was supposed to be a segue because I know who you relate to.
Yeah, so spoiler alert. Or not really, but so the character that I most relate to in Haikyuu is a combination between Sugawara and Hinata. Like I feel like I'm Sugawara, but with Hinata's ADHD because I have ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where like Hinata will get really excited about things. Um, but I think that like Sugawara is such a sick character. Because even in season one, when you see Kageyama get benched and Sugawara comes up, the approach that they have and their strengths are so different that, but like one clear example, right, is that Sugawara, he will say hi to everyone and like check in with everyone. And like somebody was commenting and they were like, "Oh, I don't think he's just doing that to be nice. He's basically checking with like what their mental state is,
Mm-hmm.
right?" And so like Sugawara will like just like talk to people, and a part of the reason why he's talking to people is just to get a grasp of like where they're at mentally and like how to support that. And like for me, that's kind of how I operate. Like even when I play like online games, right? um if I'm like in voice chat or I just see things, right, or just in my normal life, right, like I will like talk to people and then I can like just basically get a mental idea of where they're at emotionally in the moment, and like how I can help them from that point, right? Whereas Kageyama, right, who's the other setup for Kurosano, um, he's super mechanical and he's like super great at like getting the ball technical, like
Yes,
getting the
yeah.
ball where it needs to be. He's really skilled in volleyball, but his emotional intelligence is just completely shot. And I also think the reason why Kageyama is actually so good is because the juxtaposition of Sugawara and Kageyama. Like Sugawara like coaches Kageyama basically on emotional intelligence. But at the same time, it's like he's not going like Sugawara is not gonna like just stop trying to be a part of the team. He adds his own value where he can, and he knows his strengths and his weaknesses. But he's also not gonna be like, oh, I'm so bad at volleyball, I'm not gonna do anything. Like he really does show up in season four, even though it's not like he's on the main team. They absolutely like he absolutely like has crucial moments in the game that are turning points, and he's still instead of he still makes himself as valuable as possible. But it's just a different type of mindset to like what you think is how you perceive what is valuable to you, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. If that makes any sense whatsoever.
It definitely does, and yeah, no, I really resonate with that. Where he's just, I mean, he is the foil to Kageyama until Oyakawa comes into play,
Yeah.
really, you know. But instead of being a rival, he makes himself his a teacher for Kageyama, arguably a stepping stool too, for Kageyama's growth, and a step where Kageyama I don't think could have done it without Sugawara's help. Where, you know, I mean, right? Because like normally when you're competing for a spot, and season one does this really well, they're like normally Sugawara should be neck to neck, like competing against Kageyama. I mean, that would be my personal instinct, you know, and instead he pulls Kageyama aside and be just like, hey, we're on the same team. A point you get is a point I get. A point I get is a point that you get, and that's it, you know. And I think that really shows his strengths. I mean, to kind of roll with this idea of who we relate to. I know we've had this conversation before,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and you know, surprisingly, I think that like people that know me really would suspect like someone like Hinata, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the one that I've related to, and it's changed a little bit actually. Watching season 4 now, I have a more of a mix rather than one person, which is really interesting.
Ooh, I think I know where you're going with this, but
I
I want to
Yeah,
hear you
so
say
I've
it
always
before
first
I.
resonated with Oikawa. You know, I love Hinata and but he's so naturally talented in his own way that he marches to the beat of his
Which
drum.
is ironic, actually,
Yes,
like the juxtaposition of the show. But yeah, I
exactly,
know
right?
exactly.
Being imperfect. Well, right? I mean, we didn't even talk about the title. We're all imperfect protagonists, you know? So, you know, that's the whole point of it. We're trying to be better. That's why this is a segment on the wannabes. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think Oikawa I really related to because he was so purposeful in the way he developed as a volleyball player, where he became talented, you know? And I wouldn't say Oikawa was without talent. He like clearly had talent, but he had to, and this is a quote for another day, man, but you know, he had to polish that talent until it bloomed.
Oh my gosh.
And if you know, you know. You know, if you know that quote, you know that quote. But going back to what I'm saying, it's like if I really related to that because I really didn't think like I was naturally like could naturally do anything when I first started Melee or even like with my career or anything, you know. It's a lot of purposeful work, and Oyakawa was
Mm-hmm.
the first person where I really saw that, you know. And I think that that's what made me gravitate towards him, where you got to see a character that was represented in such a monstrous way on the field, on the court,
Mm-hmm.
and yet the backstory was so much of a struggle bus, you know?
Yeah, I feel really bad for his character, actually.
Yeah, me too. And then he gets trumped, right, by like two of the most talented, ridiculous monsters, being Kageyama and Hinata, right? And so that's why I always related to him. And, you know, that's kind of again why we're doing this segment. But season 4 kind of made me realize I'm definitely more of a mix of like Oyakawa, Tanaka. Like I definitely have Tanaka's self-doubt in me in a way that Oyakawa
Oh, me
also
too,
has.
dude.
And that
Yeah.
Tanaka episode about climbing steps and every 6 months or so needing to stop and looking how much
Oh
further
my
up you need to go, I think I relate to. And then honestly, I love the blonde Mia twin. Atsumu
Really?
too. I
That's so interesting to me.
Those would be my main three because like he's so I definitely love his obsessiveness with it, you know? And that sort of competitive nature is I think very similar to Oyakawa, but it kind of manifests differently because with Oyakawa his rival was beating Shiro Torizawa was more of a concrete goal, and
Hmm.
crushing Wakatoshi, or I mean Ushijima, and for Atsumu, it was beating his twin brother, right? And I think I've definitely experienced that as well, where you have like someone on your side, friends in the melee scene that you just desperately do not want to lose to. One being very easily JD.
Yeah, but at the same time, right? Like, isn't that literally Okawa's downfall? In my like if you think about the series,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have and like Kagi, like Okawa is like a juxtaposition of Kageyama and somewhat Sugawara, because like I think Sugawara is more like empathic,
Mm-hmm.
where like Okawa is more like sociopathic. Like they're both aware of emotion. Like they both have high emotional intelligence, but Okawa is totally like on the I guess I like the logical emotional intelligence side of things, where he's like more manipulative,
Mm-hmm.
where Sugawara is more like, I guess he can be manipulative, but it's more of like he's feeling their emotions and he's helping them, whereas like Okawa like plays to their insecurities and like gets them to act on that. But I think the set, and not that Okawa is a bad dude
Mm-hmm.
either, right? Because I don't think he's like toxic, you know. But I mean, even his own team was like, I don't like, I feel like you would like figure out my insecurities and use it again. Like, but I think that's the sad thing about Okawa. And it's also why he's the biggest juxtaposition of from Kageyama and Hinata, is that in Hinata was going to go against Kageyama,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that was his whole goal in middle school. When he got to high school, is I want to take down Kageyama. And then they ended up, his biggest rival ended up being on the same team, and they ended up killing it. And then Okawa had the chance to go with to Shiro Torizawa, but his pride got in the way, and
Mm,
that's why he lost. Whereas Shiro, they could have had the same duo, right?
yes,
Because
they could
the
have.
Shiro
Yeah,
Torazawa,
Oikawa
yeah,
duo could have been a
exactly.
thing. I've never
That's
thought of it that
so
way.
that yeah, that is Okawa's biggest downfall. Is he could have had the equivalent to Hinata, like Kageyama's Hinata, with Okawa, right? But he turned it down because of pride. Whereas like Kageyama, I don't think he would. Kageyama didn't care,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like he had other fish to fry, and he was traumatized. And Hinata just didn't know Kageyama was going to be on his team. But like the reason why Okawa lost was mainly just because the he was too prideful. Like he just didn't go on. He wanted to beat Okawa more than he wanted anything, right? And like the Kageyama, Hinata, and like Karosano mindset is like, let's try to go as far as we can, right? Let's try to like just see where we can get to. Let's go to nationals. Let's win
Yeah.
nationals. Let's keep going beyond. Like they Hinata and Kageyama have a conversation. Like, what if I go and become the best in Japan? What if I become the best in the world? Whereas like Okawa, he only wanted to beat Shiro Torizawa. And I think that it is like really fuck. Um,
You're good. You're good.
edit that. I'm just kidding. I think it is really important to have like milestone goals,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I don't think you should just have goals set up like way into the future, right? Like you should have like target goals, right? But that target goal of beating Shiro Torizawa was what ended up making him, his pride got in the
Mm,
way. Like that I feel like that's where Okawa personally failed, because I think he is one of
mm-hmm.
the best characters in Haikyuu. And if you put him on any team, like if he was on Shiro Torizawa, the show would be about them and they would 100% win nationals. That's my opinion.
Yeah. No, that definitely is true. I think though what's so interesting, and this is coming from someone who's I feel like seen all the sports anime. I'm onto sports manga now. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are main characters that do that. There are main characters that are like, oh, all the good people are on that team. Okay, let me go to this team and do it. You know, like, yeah,
I mean, there is something. I don't even know if it's fair for me to like criticize Okawa in that way, because there is some genuine to that, right?
Yes.
It's just like, but at the same time, it seems counterintuitive, right? Because Okawa's thing is bringing out the best in his
Mm-hmm.
teammates, right? And like wanting the best for his teammates, but at the same time, his goal isn't to elevate them as far as they can go. His goal is to just beat
Mm-hmm.
Torizawa. And that kind of is what it's like, a weird juxtaposition. Because like he's both like the most egotistical and most selfless person at the same time.
Yeah, that's true. And how sick would it be if Oikawa was the main character of the show?
It seems like he
It's
should be,
right,
right?
and that's
Like
the thing.
like and it's so crazy that he ends up being the actual main
I
antagonist.
know.
Like the dude who has talent and things going for him is the protagonist, and the dude has to work super hard and it like becomes jaded is the antagonist, is crazy to me. But I love it because, I mean, like I said earlier, Haikyuu's biggest strength to me is playing on uncertainty and things like that. Like there are times when you're watching the show where you're like, a rally is happening and you're like, I legit, like they're selling this like they're gonna get the point, but I legitimately don't know, because they'll like fake you out all the
Oh
time.
my gosh. Yeah, like
um
the end of season 4 when the screen starts to black out a little bit. That was so subtle
yeah,
and good.
that was, yeah, I don't want to spoil the actual
Yeah, of
moment,
course.
but there's definitely a point in season, like literally one of the most hypest moments in season 4, and they don't even score off of that point.
Yes.
And I was just like, but like Haikyuu is so grounded. It has like this through line where it is really like deep and philosophical, like, or philosophical, and like all this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like the power of teamwork and friendship, but it also meets reality really hard. And it kind of, it's not about like these ideas can help you escape reality, but it's more of like these ideas help you get through reality, I guess would be the best way for me to put it. Whereas I feel like a lot of anime, or philosophical things in that is like, this is how you like get certainty. Like if you believe in this and you do all that, you're 100% guaranteed. And like Haikyuu is like, there's no guarantee in anything, right? But these are like tools and like mindsets and things like that, where you're still in the real world, you're in reality. Um, but and like things are going to go wrong. It's just more about how to manage when things go wrong and how to like increase your chances of going right. Whereas like other anime, I feel like they're just like, oh man, like if you believe in the power of friendship, or like you get really angry and stuff like that. That's like honestly my favorite part about Haikyuu is it is the most it is really grounded in reality, and at the same time it also shows the benefits of like positive mentalities. Like it's not one or the other, it's like a mixed, it's both.
Yeah.
Sorry for the long tangent, by
No
the way.
worries.
I just get super
No,
hyped.
no. You don't need to apologize at all. Like, there's so much to talk about for Haikyuu. And we're gonna have, like, so many episodes where we actually talk about the quotes. You know? Like the Nishinoya quote on the recording right now. But that was more of a placeholder um, for future stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but no, like I think we hit it on the nail, and you're right. It's rooted in reality, and things aren't guaranteed, and there is plot armor to a certain extent, but Haikyuu's also set it up where the plot armor doesn't seem so guaranteed at times, and I think that's what that's what kind of made me want to cover Haikyuu for this kind of inaugural episode, where it's because it's just so real in that way, where there are things where we work hard and we lose, and it's not guaranteed, and the characters that we relate to lose, and just like us. And I think that is so, there's something really, I don't know, quiet about that.
Yeah, it's kind of the like the idea of like um you should work hard even though success isn't guaranteed.
Yes,
I guess
exactly.
is that like, and we were talking about this before, right? But it's like even with like the Wannabes podcast and like the idea of the imperfect protagonist,
Hmm.
right? Is like the idea, it's the uncertainty that makes life interesting, right? Like if anything was a sure thing, like if you woke up tomorrow and you knew how tomorrow would be, it's like there's safety in that, but that's is that really like the beauty of life is kind of the uncertainty, which is also like the scary part. But like I feel like once you decide to embrace that uncertainty, knowing that you can lose even if you give it your all,
Yeah.
right? It's not even about securing the outcome as much as it is it's like you feel you're living life, I guess.
Yeah, and to
uh,
kind of close that, it's, you know, kind of to come full circle. It's about, as you said, living your own life, but that also means that you have to recognize your own strengths and weaknesses. And this is something I struggle with too, again, going back to relating yourself to fictional characters, like you want to see the framework being done so that it gives you confidence to do it. But in reality, the hero's journey, our own personal hero's journey, is not finished yet, and it's a framework that no piece of literature or other individual in the past has done before. And so it's up to us to kind of do it live.
I mean, I think the cool part about it is like when you're watching it from a show, you see it from the outside perspective. But I think that that's also a good point of like I really believe that like sometimes to for me
Mm-hmm.
personally, so I'm speaking personal experience, I think the best way for me to like articulate it is like stepping outside yourself. Like once you can step outside yourself and then see yourself from that angle, um, it makes like for example, and I'm not exactly sure how much we have on time, but I'll give you a personal
Yeah, yeah,
example,
sure.
and I'll ask one from you too because I'm genuinely
Mm-hmm.
curious, right? Um, so I have ADHD, like I said. And like one interesting thing, I saw a Healthy Gamer GG video on this. Shout out to them. But they're talking about like different motivation
Mm-hmm.
styles. And there's like one type of motivation that you'll be like super into something, right? And you can like learn super quickly and you can like really go into it and you sprint, right? But then you will get distracted. This is like the ADHD, but then you'll get distracted and then you'll go on to another thing and another thing, right? And so like the strategy for people like me who have like ADHD is that you basically have a few things and you rotate between them. So you go to like one, two, three, four, and then back to one. And that way, once you get bored of number one, you go to number two, then you go
Mm-hmm.
to number three, four, and then rotate back. Instead, but then there are other people who are more like they're more consistently burning, like passionate about things, right? And they can like work really hard on one thing, but their biggest problem is burnout, and so they have to really watch out for that. And then there's the other type of person who like they can focus on one thing forever, and they're really slow, but once they hit a certain point, they're just
Yeah.
unstoppable, right? And that's like one personal thing that like outside of like Haikyuu, but just like looking at yourself in terms of like everybody has different strengths and everybody works different. Like
Mm-hmm.
for me, one of the reasons why, by the way, for people who don't know, I do like consulting for like the Wannabes podcast and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that because marketing is fun.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like a really interesting way to work on projects that a lot of different projects. Because if I were to only do one, I can get into it, but I'm going to get bored, right? But I can just rotate between all the different people I work with, and I'm always interested and I'm always doing things that I like. And it's like things don't have if something doesn't work for you, that doesn't necessarily mean that something's wrong. You can just tailor to your strengths. And Haikyuu does an insanely good job of showing that off. But I think to figure that out for yourself, like you just have to like look at yourself, I guess, from the outside point of view. But my main question to you is like, are there any things like that you've noticed for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of motivational style, I'm pretty much the same way as you, where I need to kind of, because I have ADHD as well, and I need to juggle a ton of stuff and like move from one end to another. So like generally it's between Melee and podcasting and some side content creation stuff, and then maybe another video game. Or I got into stocks recently and learned about that. I learned how to video edit in a week, so same exactly as you. I think like what motivates me though, like from a Melee sense, and I think this would be a good way to close it, right, is again, and I know you were shocked when I said the Mia twin, but similar to,
Yeah, I was.
yeah, I know you're shocked with me saying Atsumu, but similar to Hinata, I feel like it's just like there's this like very competitive, obsessive asshole about Melee in me, and I think Oikawa had it too, but I think Atsumu, Mia is another character that has that, where it's just like there's this sort of competitiveness to his entire character that I really enjoy. And while funny, I'm saying that I shouldn't, that like we can't relate fully to fictional characters, I think it is a trait that I see in myself, and I think that what keeps me going to do new things, like pick up the box, right? And I think one of the best moments to kind of close on is this idea of just doing what is the best, and him going for that ultra low set because it's better to set with 10 fingers than it is with 2 wrists is a summation of sometimes what how I think and what motivates me and my decision making. Because it is this blend of logic and obsession. And yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, I want to comment on that, but I don't want to start another tangent.
So. You know what? We should talk about it at the next episode when we run it, because I think this was a really good time. But
we could talk about Haikyuu for
we could, though we are hitting roughly, I think, a little bit past the 45-minute mark. Time flies.
Yeah, I figured at some point. I was like,
yeah,
I'm not sure what the time's up.
I will give you one sentence, and then we will have to just run a sequel episode and go deeper in. We're gonna go deeper in into all the specific character philosophies. But what's your one thought on that? And then we close.
Can I just have my one thought beyond Haikyuu?
Yeah, go for it.
Haikyuu is sick, and it helps you, like, as the listener, think about what your strengths and weaknesses are. If you are the protagonist, what would your strengths and weaknesses be if you step outside yourself? That's my statement, and hopefully that helps someone.
Hi. Yeah. Well, on that note, beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this new segment on the Wannabes, the Imperfect Protagonist. I hope to do many more, so if you like this, like, comment, subscribe, let me know, Discord me, so I can justify to my parents that talking about anime is cool, and that it's okay and popular to be a huge nerd. And also give a special shout out to Matt here, Ventus official remarkable Matt. I will put his Twitter is right underneath the screen. And yeah, thank you again for being a co-host for this.
Oh, dude, I mean, like, honestly any excuse to talk about Haikyuu. Yeah.
All right, man. All right, I'll talk to you later. This has been super fun.
Right. Sounds
All
good,
right,
dude.
till next time. Peace.
Peace.